everybody, so welcome once again here to Cornwall, Pennsylvania. This is the Hometown Historian channel. We are in front of the monument to the iron ore miners that served here in Cornwall for such a long period of time, from 1730s roughly, I think, into as late as maybe 1980s. I might be incorrect about that. Bethlehem Steel, they kept the iron ore mining here for quite a while until there were some floods, and they just felt at that point there wasn't enough iron ore still in the ground that made it worth pumping the water out from the floods. So this is an introduction to this series that we've been promising for a while, called the Villages of Cornwall. This is a really unique town, township more I would say, where there's a number of these different villages and neighborhoods within Cornwall Township, and each one had a specific purpose, which I didn't know originally when we did the sort of the drive through Cornwall, and we talked about it here and there. The unique thing is each one of those towns, those villages, each had sort of its own furnace. When you think about Cornwall, they say Cornwall iron furnace, you think of it being one iron furnace. And I also learned a difference between the old iron furnaces, which were the ones, say, 1830s and before, because we visited Manna Iron Furnace, sort of that tower, and it sort of narrows and goes up, and it usually either has one hole or two holes where they would put they drop the iron ore in from above, and then they heat it, they burn it, and they get all that slag off of it, and you just have that iron ore, and it would melt down into this channel and would come out, and they call it pig iron, because where it would come out, you'd have those shoots off of the main line, and it would look sort of like piglets suckling off of the mother, so they call it pig iron. And over time, the furnaces changed, the technology got better, and they went from being a wood charcoal furnace, which was a smaller furnace. We also visited, I believe, Swatera Iron Furnace, that part there near Secrets Dam out near Pine Grove and Sudburg, and they went from that type to a much more big operation, which is what these towns were. Because I was thinking originally, okay, these iron furnaces are sort of that same type of thing. Maybe the Cornwall Iron Furnace was a much larger, and then all these other ones were smaller, because they are relatively small villages. So you would assume that these iron furnace operations were rather small, and in fact they were actually quite large operations. They had switched over to anthracite coal, so they were able to burn, I guess, much hotter. They were able to take care of much more iron ore as well. And the operation in general, this wasn't just an iron furnace operation here in Cornwall, it was also an iron ore mining. Because in 1730, Peter Grubb, who founded Cornwall, he was prospecting in the area looking for a place where there would have been major iron ore deposits. And he bought 300 acres of land from William Allen, who at the time was, I believe, the Chief Justice of the colony of Pennsylvania. And he found in this area these three large hills that had quite substantial iron ore deposits. So he went and got a warrant for another 142 acres of land, which contained within its acreage those three hills. And therefore the town of Cornwall was built, was founded, and it was named after, he was from the Cornwall region, his family, so he named it Cornwall. And we went by the Hopewell mansion, the Forges mansion, for the Pennsylvania Historical Marker series. And in that series we visited that and talked about how he had made two forges there along Hammer Creek that were specifically meant to take the pig iron and make it into different other types of wrought iron. And so here he built the furnace, which was sort of one of those normal furnaces, much larger than most of them, but as we find out here in this series, each of these towns had a specific iron furnace, which was, we'll show you some of the pictures from the old operations, because sadly, besides the Cornwall Iron Furnace park there that's preserved, about a mile out that way, which would be southwest of here. Some of those buildings still remain. I believe the one oven that they had for the employees, some of that, but a lot, that's all that exists anymore. I mean, you have a couple of the mansions, some of the houses, obviously these villages that were built mainly by the Commons, those still exist, but most of the stuff is gone. So, but we'll show some of the pictures of some of those old buildings, talk about the history, talk about the families, talk about who built them, when they were built, some of the purposes of those, because they were different in certain ways. Talk about some of the conflicts within the families, because a lot of these families, I think we talked about the Colemans, probably about the Grubbs, who were the first Iron Dynasty in this area of Pennsylvania. There were a lot of conflicts, and it had to do with money, unfortunately. And we've talked about the Cornwall and Lebanon Railroad and the Cornwall Railroad, and how Robert Habersham Coleman, who was, I thought he was one of the sons of the original patriarch Robert Coleman, but apparently he was a son of one of the sons. Those four sons seem to have gotten along quite well. And it wasn't that he did something in the purpose of, I'm going to cause family hysteria or problems. He just decided he wanted his own railroad, but it caused a lot of problems. Didn't last very long. There were bad investments and such, so on. And the Grubb family had some of those same things. The two brothers, Curtis and Peter Jr., got along well, but then when it came to their kids, and there was some relationships that were had that sort of caused a lot of problems. So unfortunately, another thing I learned too is a lot of these different iron furnaces at these different locations were owned by different people within the family, so that created some problems as well at times. So you just had sort of everybody was competing, when the smarter thing would have been to get everybody together to work together, but unfortunately that's not what happens. But so we're going to be going around, we're going to be going to Toy Town, we'll be going over to Anthracite, which is now called Goose Town. This is the Cornwall Commons, where the school is, also the Church Cornwall, I believe United Methodist, which we visited earlier in a video. We will be coming back here because right over there is the original, I believe, Cornwall and Lebanon Railroad Station. Is now the Cornwall Borough offices. The Cornwall Railroad Station no longer exists. There's also a miners' village. There were for both of those railroads, there were stations for the Cornwall Railroad and the Cornwall and Lebanon Railroad, and they both led up to their rest parks where people could have day vacations. Like Mount Gretna was the sort of vacation spot for the Cornwall and Lebanon Railroad, and then Penryn Park was the day vacation spot for the Cornwall Railroad. But we'll probably video some of the churches in here, so because there's a Catholic church across the street. We'll go to Rexmont. That's got a pretty cool, unique history. And throughout these videos, we'll talk about how the setup was much more unique than what you would call company town. Because Colemans didn't like the idea of the company town, and so they specifically set it up that they took much better care of their workers than you would see. And more so, a lot of that happened in the coal industry, but you know, this was a mining industry, and the people got treated quite well. We'll also visit Bird Coleman, Miners Village, and we'll do walkthroughs of these villages as well. So it's something a little more unique, so we're not just driving through it. You actually get to see these homes and these villages a little closer up and see the beauty of them and appreciate Cornwall for really an extraordinary township and just how pretty it is. And for that railroad station thing, we'll actually walk some of the Lebanon Valley Rail Trail as well, because we can go over, I think at least one bridge that goes up to Mount Gretna. It's really, really pretty area. So it's something I think you guys will appreciate coming along on that journey and that adventure. So this is the opening of the Villages of Cornwall, and we'll look at them closer inspection, talk about their history. We're going to be done because I don't want to get struck by lightning. Or my friend here, you can name him whatever you want. We'll call him Paul. Paul sounds like a good mining name. But it's a pretty cool monument. And they also have a cool large piece of anthracite sitting right there. It's 7,230 pounds from the Cornwall open pit. But we'll talk about the different mines and what their purposes were. And then, like I said, go around. Sorry about the finger there and my ugly face. But we'll talk about a bunch of these really cool little villages, do some walkthroughs, talk about their history. because I know that was one thing that you guys said you'd appreciate. A lot of the stuff, it was 1850s when the technology started to change, and surprisingly, I thought Miners Village was the oldest of all of them because it looks the oldest, and you'd think being there at the main Cornwall iron furnace operations and Miners Village being for the miners, you would think that would be the oldest. In fact, probably besides Toy Town, and then we'll also visit a place called Crunchville, which is right next to North Cornwall, the village of North Cornwall. There's actually a pretty neat village there that was built, I think, in the 40s and the 50s, and the man that set it up would actually become the mayor of Cornwall at a point, because Cornwall Borough has a little bit of a different setup as well. But I just saw lightning, don't want to get struck. Paul will probably survive, but you can see it sort of has the miners pack for their light and stuff like that. It's pretty neat. But anyways, so I'm gonna walk back the trail here, go over to Chuck, and get back in safety. But so this will be a cool series. We'll get to see a bunch of the different houses. I'm gonna see too if I can wind out. There's, I think, in North Cornwall, and it might be anthracite. The only things that remain of the original iron ore operations and the furnaces are the administrative offices. So I'm going to see if we can go there, and then we'll also visit the actual Cornwall iron furnace location, maybe go in the museum at some point. We'll be putting these videos out over the next, probably next 2 weeks. And then we'll actually may do a drive-through through Mount Gretna as well, since that has that connection. Maybe go down to Penryn Park. Penryn Park still has its original rail station, which is quite small. If I remember correctly, I don't think it's much larger than like what you would consider like a bus stop. So, but it's still cool that that exists. And we'll talk about those places as well, and we'll go from there. So once again, as always, thank you everybody, and we will see you all about town.